You're watching Reason and Theology Live, a show dedicated to charitable discussions, debates, interviews, commentary, and analysis. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Your host, Michael, on a Sunday evening, bringing back Kevin Symonds here in just a moment, or Symonds, I'm sorry, I mispronounced it. Bringing him back, we're going to be doing a webinar here on Fatima, Our Lady of Fatima. I'm actually really excited about this because I've seen some really good content from Kevin so far, especially when it comes to Our Lady of Fatima. He does extremely well when it comes to his research. He crosses his T's, dots his I's. He chases down all kinds of references, obscure references even. He does his homework, in other words. So I'm really looking forward to this because I think that he comes at this topic from a very level-headed approach and a very well-researched perspective. So once again, very excited to bring him on. Kevin coming up next. Hey, Kevin, welcome back to the show.
Hi, thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah, I think this is your third show. Is that right?
I think
I want to say it's the third one. Yeah, and now this is the second webinar you've done, correct?
Yes.
And what was the first webinar? Maybe just kind of set the stage for us, just so that our audience is familiar.
Sure. I started a series of webinars that we're hoping to do roughly the 13th of every month between May of this year to October, kind of like doing the the Fatima imagery there. Mm-hmm. And in the first webinar, I kicked off just by kind of saying we need to start rethinking our understanding of the third part of the secret of Fatima, which is what a lot of my studies on Fatima has revolved around lately. And so I kind of offered some proofs, explanations, why I think this is necessary, and then she gave some examples like, okay, well, what happened between then and now in the 21 years that have happened since the church has published the text. Just kind of get some food for thought. And so in these next webinars, I'm kind of going deeper, like going deep diving into it a little bit more. So in order to understand the future ones, you have to kind of make sure you follow the other ones. So if anybody hasn't seen the first webinar, they should watch that one so that you really understand this one and then subsequent ones.
And now on this one, what we did is we pre-recorded a video with you. We're going to show that video, and then after that, you're going to be stick around, be available for Q&A. So everybody hold off on your questions until kind of towards the end of the video, then start putting them in. Make sure to put it to @Reason and Theology, just so I can distinguish them from the comments. But maybe go ahead and set the stage for this video that I'm about to show. What do we have to look forward to here?
All right. Well, so I said in the first webinar, we asserted that it was time for the church to revisit her interpretation of the third part of Secret of Fatima. But in this webinar, I'd like to begin going more deeply into the church's semi-official interpretation. And so we're going to begin with a reflection upon the information that is available in the Message of Fatima booklet, which is what the text that book fell. This was the booklet that the church released discussing the third part of Secret of Fatima. we're going to crack it open a little bit and look at some of the principles, the tools that the church has given us, and see if we can't use some of them to help make more sense out of the interpretation and go a little deeper than what the church has just flatly stated in the book itself.
Okay, perfect. Well, let me go ahead and see if I can add the video in. First time integrating it this way, so y'all bear with me here. Okay, I think I'm set. And then, yeah. Okay. I believe you can see that, right? You can see the kind of the YouTube area. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to press play, but please stop me if you cannot hear the audio. And also, same for y'all in the audience. Let me know if y'all cannot hear it. In fact, just let me know if you can hear it. Either way, just to make sure that the audio is good. So, okay. I am all set if you're ready.
I'm all set.
Okay.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this webinar, Revisiting the Vision, Alternative Perspectives on the Third Part of The Secret of Fatima. This is the second of 6 webinars, and this webinar is being hosted by Michael Lofton at Reason and Theology. I'd like to thank him for this opportunity. As this is the second webinar, I'd like to kind of give a quick rehash of what the first webinar was about, just to provide some context presently for this webinar. I have my setup here in front of me, so you'll notice that I kind of have my eyes, to and from. So just to let everybody know that the reason for that is because I have the script already written, and I'm kind of going between the two, like cue cards kind of a thing. In the first webinar, we asserted that it was time for the church to revisit her interpretation of the third part of the Secret of Fatima. Evidence was cited in support of this assertion. In this webinar, I would like to begin going more deeply into the church's semi-official interpretation. We shall continue doing so throughout the remaining 5 webinars, including this one, beginning with a reflection upon the information provided in the Message of Fatima booklet. In our first webinar, we noted that the Holy See released the text of the third part of the Secret of Fatima in the Message of Fatima booklet, TMF. This booklet also contained supporting documents that intended to facilitate a better understanding of Sister Lucia's text of the third part. Have the faithful, however, taken these documents and the tools that they provide us in a meaningful way? I would like to make an attempt at such an effort through the remainder of our webinar series. Let us begin with a short explanation. This matter is important for our consideration because of how the material in TMF has been treated by Father Nicholas Gruner and his associates. Over the years, they heaped much opprobrium upon the various interpretations and tools published in the Message of Fatima booklet. To be fair, though, to Father Gruner and his associates, some questions are warranted, as we'll see. Unfortunately, Gruner and his associates chose to advance their positions through heated polemics, which negatively had an impact on their argument. What I hope to do then is to approach the information in the booklet not from a hermeneutic of suspicion and conspiracy, but from an objective review of the material available to us. Having said that, let me start this review with the distinction. TMF presents 2 perspectives, those of Sister Lucia and those of the Holy See. The latter appear to be largely an interpretation of Sister Lucia's perspective. We shall here employ both perspectives with emphasis upon what Sister Lucia said, as her perspective as the visionary is valuable. The most striking evidence offered in TMF from Sister Lucia is in a letter that she wrote to Pope John Paul II, a partial reproduction of which was printed in TMF and dated May 12, 1982. In this letter, Sister Lucia clarified for the Holy Father that the third part of the secret is, quote, a symbolic revelation, revelação simbólica in Portuguese. The symbolism, she wrote, refers to Our Lady's words concerning how Russia will spread her errors throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions of the Church. The good will be martyred, the Holy Father will have much to suffer, various nations will be annihilated. As we discussed in the first webinar, recent evidence revealed that Our Lady had commanded Sister Lucia in 1944 not to reveal the understanding, significado, of the vision. Also in that webinar, we made some important observations about this command. First, we do not know, at least at this time, the reason for Our Lady's command. Second, we do not possess clarity as to what exactly was this understanding given to Sister Lucia. Third, it is not proven that she was later given permission by Our Lady to reveal this understanding. These matters admit of some debate, yet I would like to raise a question. Based on her various writings, would Sister Lucia have contradicted that understanding? Admittedly, there is much subjectivity that factors into this question. Having studied Fatima, however, for some time, the image of Sister Lucia which impresses itself upon my mind is that of a humble and obedient servant of Jesus and Mary. One could propose numerous proofs for this, but in keeping with our theme of the third part of the secret, I shall propose one proof: her confusion over whom to obey in the writing down of the third part. Sister Lucia struggled to write down the third part of the secret. This struggle has been characterized wrongfully in previous years by many traditionalist writers, suggesting, for instance, that Sister Lucia was terrified of the third part. But in actual fact, her struggle was over religious obedience. Our Lady had commanded her on July 13, 1917, "Do not tell this to anyone. Yes, you may tell Francisco." In 1943, however, the Bishop of Leiria, Fatima, had ordered her to write down the third part. Sister Lucia was now in turmoil because she was, understandably, accustomed to the will of God being manifested in orders from her superiors. Our Lady's appearance in early January of 1944 to Sister Lucia removed this confusion and explained the reason for it. God wished to test, provar in Portuguese, Sister Lucia's virtue, specifically her faith, humility, and obedience. If she experienced such a trial that demonstrated these virtues, it becomes harder to believe that she would have contradicted the understanding of the third part that she received. For another example of how seriously Sister Lucia took obedience, I strongly encourage the reading of her own account of how she was able to affix the green wax seals on the envelopes containing the third part of the secret. Based upon these considerations, then, I think that if we are to study the third part of the secret, we should take seriously various statements from Sister Lucia. Oftentimes, however, she was very subtle when speaking of her mystical experiences. I discussed this fact of Sister Lucia's life and character in Chapter 4 of my book in terms of her being truthful yet evasive. Because of Sister Lucia's subtlety, I like to use the term indications when speaking about her various statements that directly or indirectly pertain to the third part of the secret. Sister Lucia's statements take the form of verbal and written communications. They are certainly found within the Message of Fatima booklet, but also in her other writings, some of which are only now becoming available to us. For this reason, they do not yet have a wide circulation and have not had a lot of time to enter into the public awareness of Fatima. In order then to factor these new documents with what we know about Sister Lucia, a careful hand is required. I shall attempt to perform this task throughout this webinar series. Before continuing on to the next section, I would like to recap what we have discussed thus far. The Message of Fatima booklet contains two perspectives on the third part of the secret, Sister Lucia's and the Holy See's. The latter seems to depend upon various indications from Sister Lucia as to the interpretation of the text. While we now know that Sister Lucia was given the meaning of the vision, she was also commanded by Our Lady not to reveal it. Without Heaven's permission, then, whatever Sister Lucia said about the third part would necessarily be circumspect, but likely quite faithful to what she was given to understand of the vision's meaning. Let us now go deeper into examining the meaning of the vision, but limiting our focus only to Sister Lucia's perspective and not that of the Holy See's. We begin our present discussion with a look at the text of the vision and the scene depicted therein. Here is the text from 1944. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. The third part of the secret revealed at the Cova de Ira Fatima on 13 July 1917. I write in obedience to you, my God, who command me to do so, through His Excellency the Bishop of Leiria, and through your most holy mother and mine. After the two parts which I have already explained, at the left of Our Lady and a little above, we saw an angel with a flaming sword in his left hand. Flashing, it gave out flames that looked as though they would set the world on fire, but they died out in contact with the splendor that Our Lady radiated towards him from her right hand. Pointing to the earth with his right hand, the angel cried out in a loud voice, "Penance, penance, penance." And we saw in an immense light that is God, something similar to how people appear in a mirror when they pass in front of it, a bishop dressed in white. We had the impression that it was the Holy Father. Other bishops, priests, men and women religious going up a steep mountain, at the top of which there was a big cross of rough-hewn trunks as of a cork tree with the bark. Before reaching there, the Holy Father passed through a big city half in ruins and half trembling with halting step, afflicted with pain and sorrow. He prayed for the souls of the corpses he met on his way. Having reached the top of the mountain, on his knees at the foot of the big cross, he was killed by a group of soldiers who fired bullets and arrows at him, and in the same way there died, one after another, the other bishops, priests, men and women religious, and various lay people of different ranks and positions. Beneath the two arms of the cross, there were two angels, each with a crystal aspersorium in his hand, in which they gathered up the blood of the martyrs, and with it sprinkled the souls that were making their way to God. Tui 3/1/1944. The vision shows people from all walks of life and vocation journeying toward a great cross upon a mountain. While journeying toward this cross, people are martyred. Where there is martyrdom, there is persecution, or at least some difficulty that requires the witness, martyr, of those who are faithful to Jesus Christ and his gospel. Tertullian once famously stated in his Apologeticus that, quote, "The blood of Christians is their seed, semina sanguis Christianorum," end quote. Sister Lucia's description says nothing about the reason for the martyrdom. Her letter of May 12, 1982 to John Paul II, however, offers an indication. She said that the vision refers to Our Lady's words in the second part of The Secret about persecution, suffering, and the spreading of Russia's errors. Those errors were intimately bound to atheism and all that such a belief system entails, including the error of materialism, which denied the existence of the spiritual, immaterial world. In the second part of The Secret, Our Lady specified in 1917 that there would be another war beginning in the pontificate of Pope Pius XI, who, we should note, was elected Pope 5 years later in 1922. This war is understood to mean World War II, as this war came after the prediction of Our Lady of the night illumined by an unknown light, which would be a great sign that God gives that he is going to punish the world for its crimes. This war, it seems, would be somehow connected not only to the spreading of Russia's errors of atheism and materialism, but strongly suggests a moral decay in the West in general. Historians will be in a better position to demonstrate this connection as more documentation becomes available. For now, we shall take at face value Sister Lucia's insight that the errors of Russia were behind World War II and others. Finally, let us consider that there is an organic unity to the overall Secret of Fatima. Sister Lucia said in her 1982 letter that the third part refers to Our Lady's words in the second part of The Secret. Based upon Sister Lucia's interpretation, we can reasonably conclude there is some convergence between the second and third parts, to say nothing of their relationship with the first part. The vision can refer to events around the time of World War II, though not necessarily exclusively. It is here that I would like to end the presentation for this particular webinar. When next we meet, we shall consider more deeply the errors of Russia in communism. Thank you all for joining us today here at Reason and Theology. Unless there is something that Mr. Lofton would like to add or present, I will happily take any questions from the chat room that you may have.
All right. Thank you for that, Kevin. Let me see here. Let me switch it back to us. Okay, there we go. And was it coming through loud enough for you on your end, by the way?
On my end, yeah, everything seemed to be fine.
And then people in the chat room, I think everybody else was able to hear it as well. Good deal. Well,
I got to get a little mic to connect to my camera and then figure this out.
Well, if y'all will, go ahead and send some questions, any questions related to what we just saw in Our Lady of Fatima. anything that you want for Kevin. And, in the meantime, while we're waiting on questions, by the way, send them to @Reason and Theology. While we're waiting on them, I have a couple. But let me know if if this is going to be something that you address maybe later on in another webinar. Feel free to punt on them right now. But okay, so we're talking about the interpretation here of the message, the third secret. Well, I guess one of the questions that I've always been curious about is in the first and second secret, there's a Marian interpretation given. The Virgin gives her interpretation. Whereas in this third one, it doesn't seem that there is a Marian interpretation provided. Are you able to speak on that at this time, or is that maybe covered later?
We can talk a little bit about it now. We get into a little bit more of it later on in subsequent webinars, but there's actually a grave, let me kind of start by saying there's actually a grave mistake that people have understanding the structure of the secret of Fatima in its totality, not just the third part. A lot of people are of the opinion that there's what, can I actually say the name, or will that be a little too edgy? But Taylor Marshall puts it out in terms of 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, 3A, 3B, and all that stuff. That's kind of like the popular thing right now that he's promoting. But unfortunately, that is a grave mistake to understanding the structure of the third part of the Secret of Fatima. It is true that in the first part, Our Lady shows the vision of hell. And then she explains it very simply. You have seen hell where the souls of poor sinners go. That's a very quick, short, simple explanation. Then she goes into the second part, but there's no 2A, 2B. So if 1A, for instance, is the vision, 1B is the explanation, 2A would be an explanation, another vision, or 2B would be another, vision explanation, and then subsequently for the third part as well. But that's not what it is. There is the vision explanation in the first part. Then the second part is entirely comprised of words of Our Lady that follows when she says, to save them, in order to save them, not from hell, mind you, in the sense of like you're already in hell and you can come out of hell, but in the sense of in order to save them from going to hell, God wishes to establish in the world devotion to my Immaculate Heart, etc. And she mentions all of these things that will happen in the second part as she's revealing the devotion and why it's important to do this. Then, at the very end of the second part, she says the very famous words, in Portugal, the dogma of the faith shall always be preserved. Then we go into the third part, which was a vision, and apparently there was some explanation that was given to Lucia understand of what the images were all about. But yet, as I'll cover in subsequent webinars, what we see happening then in the third part is it's a visualization of what Our Lady said in the second part. All of the components are there. So I think we have to revisit our understanding of the structure of the secret itself, the overall secret, and I hope to do that a little bit more in upcoming webinars. But that's kind of the general nuts and bolts. And so more specifically then, refresh my memory as to your question again.
Well, is there something missing, or is there an interpretation given by the Virgin to the third secret that's missing?
Well, we now know that this was a hotly contested issue from 2000 to 2013. But once we had the publication of this book here, Un Caminho sob a Olhar de Maria, A Pathway Under the Gaze of Mary, this was published by the Carmelites of Coimbra in Portugal, Santa Teresa Convent, which is where Sister Lucia lived for the last 56 or so years of her life. The sisters based this biography of Sister Lucia upon private as well as public documents from Sister Lucia. And chapter 13 is entitled O Segredo Escrito, the secret written, if you want to just keep it the written secret. But, and they revealed for the first time what Our Lady said to Sister Lucia in 1944, early January 1944. And when we knew that Our Lady had appeared to her at that time, but what we didn't know was what Our Lady said. The sisters put that in the biography, and this became a flashpoint and just sparked the debates between 2014 2015. I myself was involved with that in that debate. It was Christopher Ferrara from Father Gruner's Fatima Center called it Biogate, because there was a discrepancy with the English translation. But I don't go by the English translation published here in English. I always pull out the Portuguese. And what Our Lady says, and I'm reading this straight out of the text. I'm not even going to attempt Portuguese live on air because it's a beautiful language and I don't want the Portuguese yelling at me. But Our Lady says to her, this is on the bottom of page 266. Everybody can see it here. I like having visuals. Our Lady says to her, "Não temas, do not fear, because for God wished to test your obedience, faith, and humility. Esta imhaj, be at peace," or in peace, literally, "and write that which they command you." O te mandam in Portuguese. "Now porém, but not that which is given to you to understand of its meaning. When you have written, put it into an envelope, enclose and seal the outside of the envelope, and write that this can only be opened, que suppose ser aberto a 1960 in Portuguese. It can only be opened in 1960 by the Lord Cardinal Patriarch of Lisbon or by the Lord Bishop of Leiria. Again, these are Our Lady's words, as written by Sister Lucia herself. I'm not arguing the Mother of God. But that's the word significado, but not that which is given to you to understand of its meaning. Significado in Portuguese. So we know that something at some point in time was communicated to the mind of Sister Lucia about what those images meant. What that something is debated, but I do get into it in future webinars, actually. Sister Lucia did leave us some clues, and I get into those clues, the known ones anyway, that I have access to, especially in future webinars. And I think it's going to be very enlightening and intriguing for people. So that's one of those stay tuned deals.
So to clarify, the Vatican's not hiding some kind of interpretation given by the Virgin because it's damning to its own position currently. Is that right?
As best as I understand it, that seems to be the case. Our Lady said, don't write it down. So how can there be a second text being hidden by the Vatican if the Mother of God herself said, don't write it down? So
I guess then, let me know again if I'm venturing out too far away from tonight's topic and if this is going to be covered elsewhere. But some are going to know, well, Benedict, back when he was Ratzinger, Cardinal Ratzinger, he was talking about, I think this was in 84, about how the third secret is about the destruction of the liturgy. And you can see Pius XII talking about things along those lines. There's going to be a destruction of the liturgy. And there's all these people who allegedly had read the third secret, and they're talking about a corruption from the top down. And when we read the third secret, I guess I don't really get that impression. So how do we reconcile those things?
Well, here's the thing. That's what you say is a loaded question, not in the sense of the logical fallacy understanding of that expression, but in the sense of like you've packed it in with a lot there. Let me kind of untwist it a little bit. Let me begin with the Ratzinger one. Mm-hmm. People need to understand Ratzinger. First of all, Ratzinger did make these comments. Mm-hmm. They are in his book, The Ratzinger Report. Or the Ratzinger Adventure, which the one that was published by Ignatius Press back in the mid-80s.
Yeah, the Ratzinger Report, yeah.
Yeah, but what he said was not out of line with the text itself. Because, for instance, Sister Lucia very clearly describes this scene, people going up the mountain and towards his cross. in terms of it being a martyrdom. So if there's martyrdom, there's a danger, right? It makes sense. That's not a leap of logic. There's some kind of a persecution. Well, Our Lady talked about this in terms of the errors of Russia. We know that the errors of Russia are involved with like atheism, materialism, and in a word, communism, and all that comes with that. So these attacks against the faith are going to largely be ideological and spread into a cultural milieu. Well, when you're breathing in that kind of a toxic environment, that poses a danger to the faith. So when Ratzinger's talking about in the Ratzinger report that Our Lady talks about this and warns us about dangers threatening the life of the Christian, this is not out of harmony with the text itself. Ratzinger has an interest in eschatology. He has a whole book. I can't remember the theologian's name. I think Auer, where he talked about eschatology. So Ratzinger is very familiar with what the term means. And this was one of the discrepancies that I discovered in my research. When there was a slight mistranslation in one of the translations of the Ratzinger report. The Italian word is novissimi. It was translated in Frère Michel as le dernier temps, the last times. But that's not really the best translation for that word. The novissimi concerns the last things. So we talk about like death, judgment, heaven, hell. It can also refer to the end times, the last days. It's a mix in terms of how the word is used depending upon the context. So I think it was a mistranslation in this French text of this word. And I think that it's better translated as the last things, or just left alone. Just put it as novissimi, which is a perfectly acceptable word to use across different languages. And so, properly understood with Ratzinger's comment on the subject to the Italian journalist Vittorio Messori, I think it comes much more into focus and helps us to understand the third part of the secret better. In the latter webinars, I actually do address this question, so there will be more on that at that time. But there was also the Pius XII quote, and then there was another one.
I vaguely recall him allegedly. I haven't been able to trace some of this stuff down. I've only read it through secondary and tertiary sources, but he allegedly said something to the effect that there was going to be a destruction of the liturgy. Something along those lines.
I actually have the book here. Actually, it's right over here. I'd go grab it, but then people would see me get off the chair, and it wouldn't look good in terms of the visuals here. But I have it right here in the box here in my office. But yes, that comes from a book, Pieds devant l'histoire, written by Monsignor Georges Roche, and it was a controversial book when it was published. But in there, he's recounting comments that were made by Cardinal Pacelli in the 1930s. It was early 1930s, if I remember correctly. It says he says something to the effect of, "I am worried about the confidences or the secrets, if you will, given to little Lucia Fatima." And then he sits there and talks about how I'm concerned for all of the things that people wanting to dismantle the sacred chapel. People will search in vain for the red light of the sanctuary lamp. It's a pretty dire sounding prediction. But these comments were made before we even knew that there were three parts of the secret of Fatima. I think this interview that Roche is accounting for is somewhere between 1931 and 1935. This was before Sister Lucia put pen to paper and wrote her memoirs. So I don't know how much credence we can give to say that he was basing himself upon something that he may have seen at the Vatican concerning the third part of the secret.
Had either one of those read the third secret? Had either one of them read the third secret?
No, it's not. Historically, it's not possible. Barring an authentic private revelation to then Cardinal Pacelli, it would have been impossible for him to have known, because nobody even knew that there were three parts of the secret from 30 to 35, 1930s it is. So that quote needs to be understood properly.
So are you saying effectively they were just kind of speculating what the third secret might contain? Is that right?
Not Pacelli. No, he wasn't even speculating about it. No, all he does to connect it to Fatima is when he says, "I am worried about the confidences or the secrets given to little Lucy." That's the only thing that connects that to Fatima. But this was the first half of the 1930s. The secret of Fatima wasn't the memoirs of Sister Lucia, which I have right here, and I can show you. This is the photostatic reproduced edition published by Father Martins. He was a Jesuit and a Fatima scholar. These are her actual. This is her actual handwritten text. It's reproduced in the book. The first four memoirs plus some of her letters. Sister Lucia didn't start writing this until, let's see, the official date is September 12th, 1935. And she finished just before Christmas of 1935. So it took about 3-4 months to write the first memoir. But the book didn't exist when Pacelli made that comment, the first memoir. No one knew that there were three parts to the secret. And moreover, she revealed that there were three parts in the third memoir, which was in the early 1940s. Mm-hmm. So the timeline just doesn't add up. Pacelli could not have been talking about the secret of Fatima overall. He may have been speculating upon what he knew generally, if he even made the comment. We're not sure. The book had some controversy. Some people were challenging it in the French language speaking world. They were challenging it because they thought it was inaccurate or something. I don't remember all of the ins and outs of that debate, but this may in fact be further evidence that the book may not be reliable if people are trying to connect it to Fatima when it doesn't belong.
Another question before we get to the chat questions. You mentioned there the Dogma will be preserved in Portugal.
Mm-hmm.
Why does it end abruptly there, and what is it referring to? Any thoughts there?
It ends abruptly because the third part of the secret began there at the end. So that last sentence about Portugal and the dogma of the faith is actually the ending part of the second part of the secret. It's not the so-called beginning of the third. That was a mistake of interpretation that was given by the French writer Frère Michel de la Sainte Trinité in his book The Whole Truth About Fatima in the original French. But Frère Michel interpreted it that way, and it led to a lot of problems later on. A lot of problems. But that phrase is in the fourth memoir, and when you read what Sister Lucia wrote when she wrote the fourth memoir, she mentions, I don't remember the exact page, I know I have it in my book, but she expressly states that she will write, she will write in accordance with what she can say, but she also will not write what she cannot say. So, one of the things she says right here is, if sometimes my own imagination or mind suggests something, I immediately feel that it lacks the divine unction, and I stop until I know in the intimate of my soul what God wants me to say instead. She's not going to try to hide anything consciously, but she's going to write about what she can, except the third part of the secret, especially. So when she writes about this, she puts that phrase, but having already said she's not going to write what she can't write, and especially as it pertains to the third part of the secret, then necessarily that phrase has to be the ending of the second part. So how does that phrase work organically with the rest of the second part of the secret? That's chapter 9 of my book on the third part of the secret of Fatima. I get into how that works, because so many people have just gotten they've gotten it wrong. They've misunderstood how to understand the secret. Again, going back to what we said earlier about the structure, for instance, the structure of the secret is what has been one horrible misunderstanding after another. But the content is another area that I think people need to work with, and to understand better. So that phrase is at the end of the second part of the secret. And we know this because, as I say in chapter 9, war has a deleterious effect upon faith. I get into this, I think, in the third webinar. I quote Pius XII in an allocution that he gave during his pontificate, where it's a very, very powerful point that he makes. So I'll save it for then. But the third webinar will address this a little bit more, that point about what's the connection here between the effects of war and faith. And then once we understand that connection, that phrase we see how it works organically with the second part of the secret. But if people if they want a little bit of a jump ahead, they can. Chapter 9 of my book has more of a discussion on that.
Are we able to get a sneak peek on what the dogma being referred to here is, or is that's going to be next time?
I think that the word itself, when Our Lady says the dogma of the faith, I mean, if you look at it just etymologically, or just how it was been used. So, for instance, in the New Testament, it says when Caesar Augustus sent out the orders that there was to be a census. The word the word for decree is dogma. Mm-hmm. He sent out a dogma saying that this is supposed to take place, and that's why Mary and Joseph went up to Bethlehem. Mm-hmm. The dogma, I don't go into this proper into the future webinars, although maybe I can add it in. But my take on what Our Lady meant when she said dogma was like our adherence to it, like how we understand it, our living it in our everyday life, taking it seriously, taking the faith seriously, and putting the doctrines and dogmas of the faith into practice every day. That's my general understanding. And I'll probably best I just kind of leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a whole lot of people who are going to still wonder, though, well, how has Portugal maintained the faith better than others? Is this maybe something that's going to be in the future, or any thoughts here?
When you look at the history of what happened in Portugal in the 20th century, there are books about this. Regretfully, not all of them in English, mostly over there in Europe. But after the Portuguese bishops consecrated the country to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, there was a very powerful flourishing of the faith in Portugal. It wasn't the consecration requested by Our Lady of Russia to the Immaculate Heart, but God still honored it. And as a matter of fact, in the locution, I think it was, or a vision to Sister Lucia later, our Lord or Our Lady had said to Sister Lucia that there are going to be positive effects, and this was a sign. What will happen in Portugal is a sign to the rest of the world what would happen, or what would have happened, if Russia had been consecrated in time. So this great flowering of faith took place in Portugal. People were strong practicing of the faith. And then I know Salazar doesn't get too many good reviews nowadays, but there's a lot of history there. And because there's a lot of Marxist propaganda that runs rampant now in Portugal, a lot of his legacy has been distorted. That's kind of the sense that I'm getting there. But Salazar was, in fact, trying to bring about or assist this revival of the faith in Portugal. Maybe he wasn't the best at it. He may have made mistakes. We can argue that till the cows come home. But there was a lot of good being done as well. And so that area of Portuguese history, I'm not as well versed on as perhaps I should be. But there was a flowering of the faith in Portugal nonetheless. And even so, in the 1970s, the communists almost took power in Portugal. And Sister Lucia told everybody, you all need to pray the rosary. Like, seriously, like, don't even wait. Get on your knees now and pray the rosary. And a lot of people got on their knees and prayed the rosary, and the communists got overthrown. Almost as soon as they came in, they were out. So that, again, is a part of the sign of what would happen, the effects of this consecration.
Okay. This one is from 101 Caliber. In your opinion, is the part about bullets and arrows symbolic language? No modern military uses arrows except maybe some special forces.
I think a lot of it is symbolic. There is also the literal sense of bullets, because Our Lady predicted there would be another worse war that would break out during the pontificate of Pius XI, which most people understand to be as World War II. So they're literal bullets. But as I discussed in one of the upcoming webinars, Sister Lucia did actually have a few words about what these soldiers in the vision were and what they were doing. Again, I'll get into that. I think it's the third or the fourth webinar. But yes, I think it is symbolic. And the point that it's making is it's the spread of Russia's errors. And these soldiers are enforcing it, and they're killing people who are trying to remain faithful to the gospel of Jesus Christ, represented in the people going up towards this big cross. You know, the cross is supposed to be the universal symbol of Jesus Christ. But yes, I do think it is largely symbolic. You may be able to draw out certain points, like, okay, well, what do arrows mean, say, for instance, in the scriptures? Bullets were not in the scriptures in the sense that we understand it today. So, you know, how we refer to it, why bows and arrows and, you know, guns, and those are very specific questions that we may have to have some. We need more information, more intel before we can really get that specific.
Catholic Ben Shapiro asks, any groups or sources to avoid when looking into Fatima? Seems to be many conspiracies and sensationalistic conclusions which might misguide people.
If Catholic Ben Shapiro is looking for a specific group for me to name, I could. Otherwise, his actual answer is just flat out, yes, there are groups that I would say we should be avoiding. For me to name them, that borderlines legal issues.
Well, maybe mention some of maybe not the people or the groups, but some of the things that you might hear from somebody. And if you hear those, maybe avoid those.
Yeah. In terms of theories, whoever promoted them, that being aside, I know someone was asking earlier in the chat room about the imposter Lucia theory, that there was an imposter Lucia running around. I absolutely think that is a damnable hypothesis, absolutely damnable hypothesis, and I'll tell you why. No one of her still living relatives has ever said, that's not my aunt. Well, that's not my sister. Sister Lucia entered the Carmel of Coimbra in 1948, and one of her nieces is still alive. She just turned 101 years of age. She still sits in her chair, holding her rosary. She's praying. She greets pilgrims. Maria dos Anjos, I think, is her name. And she's still alive. And she's the daughter of Lucia's sister, one of Lucia's sisters. She knew Lucia before her entrance to the Carmel in 1948. She has never said that's not my aunt. And so the only way that you can support this conspiracy theory of the imposter Lucia is that you have to string it up and prop it up with further conspiracies. So they bought Maria dos Anjos off. They threatened her life. Something, okay, where's the proof? Show me the money. No one's provided it. So it's just, I know there's one organization out there that it has actually gone back and done some forensic stuff. They hired somebody who worked for the government at one point. I myself have interacted with the gentleman who is promoting this particular theory. And all I can say is, from my own personal experience, I will not name him, but from my own personal experience, I don't believe, and this is going to sound insulting, but I'm going to say it anyway, I don't believe that this person knows how to follow an authentic conversation. Because when I've tried to engage in dialogue with this person, they don't seem to remember things very well. They don't seem to be able to follow it very well. As a matter of fact, this person misrepresented some statements that I had made privately that were in print. So if it's via email, if they're in print via email, what should you do before you just go and trash somebody on the internet? You should double check what they said, right? This person did not do that. And that's where I said, you don't even know how to follow an argument, how to follow and thus later properly represent a discussion that you had in writing. How can I believe you that, how can I take you seriously when you're construing all these things about an imposter Lucia? You know, just with me alone, you're not with the program, you know, like you're not with the program. And I'm sorry, I know this is horribly insulting, but I have looked into it, and I even know why this person. It turns out I'm friends with the guy who gave the idea to look into this imposter Lucia theory to the gentleman who is promoting this. I'm actually friends with this guy. I'm not permitted to say his name because this person has children, and I don't want to, harm the family. But I do look at these things. I do talk to people. And so when I say things, it's, not without warrant. So based upon my personal experience with the gentleman who is promoting this imposter Lucia theory at this time, I don't see any reason to give this any credence whatsoever. None. It is damnable and execrable, I'd say.
This one is from Nick. Kevin, I find it very strange that Our Lady of Lourdes said hardly anything with no predictions, but Our Lady of Fatima said a lot. Any thoughts here?
Our Lady of Lourdes actually did say stuff. Sister Bernadette Subaru took secrets with her to the grave. She never revealed them. So at least this is according to some of the research that a friend of mine over in Ireland had done. She had even written a letter to Pius IX, Blessed Pius IX, Bernadette Subaru, that had remained hidden until he found it in the Vatican archives. So I don't know if he ever published it or not, but we know that Our Lady had communicated some information to Bernadette, and Bernadette took that information with her to the grave. So more was said, but we don't know what was said.
This is from Iden. What do you think of why do you think John the 23rd did not reveal the contents of the third secret?
Ooh, that's a good one. Actually, we actually have the direct answer to that. John the 23rd had a private secretary named Monsignore Loris Francesco Capavilla. Capavilla passed away in 2016, I think. He was about 101 years of age at the time of his death. He actually gave an interview several years ago, and he flat out said, we didn't publish it because there was no directive to publish it. He said there was no note saying that it had to be published in 1960. So there you go. That's the straight answer from his personal secretary who was there when John the 23rd had looked at everything. Now that may seem a bit crazy because people are like, well, it was right there on the envelope. It can only, 1960 was right on the envelope. The date was on the envelope. But if you read what the Portuguese says, that I said earlier, que suppose ser aberto a 1960, it can only be opened in 1960, not published. Aberto is a past participle in Portuguese, meaning opened. It doesn't mean published. There's a distinction. So Capavilla is actually correct. There was no note saying that it had to be published in 1960, only that it could be opened. and presumably read. And the note further said, by the Patriarch of Lisbon or the Bishop of Leiria. Well, the document was passed to Rome, the original, not a copy. It was passed to Rome in 1957. So when 1960 came, it was entirely in the Pope's hands to reveal it or not. There was no copy made, and only the original was sent to Rome in 1957. So therefore, Our Lady's command could not have been fulfilled as she had specified it. And actually, little known fact, but in 2016, Dr. Cristina Sobral had published a critical edition of Sister Lucia's memoirs, and I have a copy of it here. In the back, there was a questionnaire that was put to Sister Lucia about the third part of the secret. Let's see. Yes, here on page 451 of the appendices, it was question 161, answer 89. She's asked, could you have imagined the third part of the secret being destined to go to the Vatican? And she flat out says no. One word, no. Yeah, so, and then she flat out states, right here, again, I'm going to show you, right here, let's see, right here, she flat out states that it's one thing, it is one thing to open, it is another to mandate its publication. And here's what she says. Esse ordem now existe. And this order does not exist. This is Lucia. I'm not making this up. This is Lucia herself in a questionnaire published on page 451 of the critical edition of the memoirs by Dr. Cristina Sobral. She said, this order does not exist. She said that it seems to be a norm of prudence, and it seems well to her that it not be revealed as of the time of this questionnaire, which I think was in the early 90s. So there you have it. I mean, it's Lucia herself. She herself flat out states there was no order to publish it. It was only that it could be opened. So that's a distinction that she herself makes. And in the video, I had the reproductions of her envelopes. I use these for demonstrations. And this is a rough, terrible reproduction of what the original envelope had looked like. But I tried to copy it over in the exact handwriting, but even right down to the 3 wax seals there. It just, I suppose I could have joked with everybody and said they let me have the originals. Here they are in North Dakota. Then I would have gotten in a lot of trouble, right? Gibbon's a fraud, Right. He's part of the conspiracy, But yeah, so it was a total shock to Sister Lucia that it went to the Vatican. She was like, "Wait, what?" But she herself says there was no order to publish.
So only John the 23rd wasn't being disobedient to Our Lady as we popularly hear. Is that right?
Nope, not at all. Not at all.
This one is. Go ahead.
Yeah, so in my opinion, anyway, no.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on the claim that Malachi Martin also read the secret? Have any witnesses confirmed it, or is there no evidence?
Who posed that question?
101 Caliber.
Okay. I think Malachi Martin was a good Irishman. He knew how to spin a good story. I don't believe for 2 seconds that he actually read the third part of the secret. No, I don't believe that. No. And I base that upon how he talked about things in his book, Windswept House, other things that he said in his, there was the Art Bell radio show interview that he gave. It just doesn't match. It doesn't add up with what we know. He talks about people would read it and they'd be fainting and passing out or something. It's a highly sensationalized version. And it just doesn't jive with what we know of the history. When you look at that history from a serious, sober, objective viewpoint.
Somebody is asking, Nick is asking about Padre Pio and Father Amort, in a connection there about Our Lady of Fatima and the third secret. Have you heard about this before?
Yes. That
Can you tell us what exactly their claim is, and what are your thoughts on it?
supposedly Padre Pio had made comments to the Italian exorcist Padre Gabriele Amort, and Amort went to God a few years ago. But Amort had claimed Padre Pio told me XYZ about the third part of the secret of Fatima. Well, Amort also believed in Medjugorje. Ooh, yeah, I just said the M word. That's a big controversy. And he was pretty uncritical in his assessment of it. But without some kind of a declaration from Padre Pio himself, as important as and as a lot of good as what Father Amort had done, he offers no evidence to back up this assertion. And I haven't looked at it in any great depth, but I do know that there was a Spanish writer, and of course, watch, I don't have the book here on my shelf. It's over there with my other stuff. But the one time I need it, right? Go figure. There was a Spanish writer, Jose Maria Zavala, who had a whole book talking about this, and he attributed something to Padre Pio as well. Yeah, it's the book is out with my other books. I apologize. I can't pull it off and show you and go from it, but I do have an article about it on my website. It's Fatima and Zavala, I think is the article is entitled on my website. Yeah, darn. Well, he talks about Padre Pio, but he also talks about an alleged statement, a text. He produces a text that is supposedly the real third secret of Fatima, third part of the secret, that has 20 to 25 lines. Well, we know that that's bunk because the 20 to 25 lines, I utterly debunked in chapter 2 of my book in showing that discrepancy. So Zavala was pushing this stuff as well, and he turns out to be not as reliable, again, when you look at the history. I refer people to the article I have about this on my website. I think it's called Fatima and Zavala. There is a Spanish edition as well. I had it translated into Spanish for those who would feel more comfortable reading in Spanish.
Where exactly did Father Amort say that about Medjugorje? Just curious. Offhand, do you recall?
Interviews that he gave over the years. I don't know the names off the top of my head, but they were personal interviews. And I think maybe in one book that he was quoted in or something, but primarily interviews is what jumps to my mind.
Okay. Well, I don't see any other questions. Any concluding thoughts that you wanted to offer for the webinar? I just want to encourage everybody to, make sure that you follow the webinars in sequence, because things kind of build upon one another, and there's going to be a huge blowout in the sixth one. I've designed it where we got this huge, we go out with a bang. Okay, you're probably going to even see me cry as I'm delivering the sixth one, actually, because it's very meaningful, it's very powerful, it's very emotional even. So to get up to that impact, please make sure that you watch all of them, because this is groundbreaking stuff. And I'll reveal a secret, pun intended. I have based it in part upon one of her unpublished letters that I myself have seen. And I draw from that letter in order to make the point. I think it's going to be very profound, but you have to pay attention. You have to follow the sequence of everything. So, I hope people are able to do that. And I know Aiden Webb is asking where we can find the webinars. As far as I know, the rest of the webinars will be here on your channel. The first one is on my YouTube channel. But I think that's
yeah, I think that's about everything at this point. So just, I hope to see everybody again. It's a pleasure doing this. And if I just may ask one last thing, just recently we had a tragedy in my family. My brother passed away suddenly and unexpectedly while at home. I just asked for, if people would please pray for him. It's been 3 months and we're, finding the results now of the cause of death. And, I just asked for people to please pray for his soul in the charity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I really appreciate your time in doing this. It's good to hear some of the other perspectives that are out there on Fatima, because we sure tend to hear only one perspective. So I really appreciate you coming and offering another one. It's been very helpful. Look forward to the next one.
All right. I'm looking forward to it too. Thank you so much for hosting. It's been
Glad to do it.
Pleasure.
Yeah. And everybody, thank y'all for watching. Thank you for the comments, the questions, the participation there in the chat. As I always say, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Share this on your social media, your Facebook, your Twitter, Instagram, whatever else you want to share it on. And again, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notification for future shows. And then also check us out, patreon.com/reason and theology, if you want to support what we're doing here and also get access to extra content. And I think that's going to do it. So God bless you all. Y'all have a great evening. Good night.